It's been a while since the Hornets have won a game. Last night to the Nuggets, no different. Now we're talking about 3 blowout losses for the Charlotte Hornets. Plus, we'll sprinkle in all throughout the show some of the New Year's resolutions that we and the listeners want for this franchise. All today, Locked On Hornets podcast.
You are Locked On Hornets, your daily Charlotte Hornets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
In a minute, cuz we live.
It's Locked On Hornets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day. Thanks for making us your first listen. We are free and available anywhere you get your podcast, and that includes YouTube. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. That's Doug Branson. Find him on his Substack, everyhornetsboxscore.com. You can also get involved on the subtext. You can find more information on his Substack website. Lots of subs. It's hard to decipher all of them. I'm Walker Mail. I'm Walker Mail. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Just, skipping through life, talking about the Charlotte sports scene with the Hornets on an 11-game losing streak and the Panthers owner throwing drinks at fans. So it's a lot of fun talking
What's
about
worse?
the Charlotte sports scene. I know, honestly, not even close. It's the owner. I think we all know that. We can find the local angle on that a little bit later on.
Tease.
We'll get to the third quarter here. That darn third quarter, as you see on the bulletin board, 111-93. The Hornets lose to the Denver Nuggets once more. I mean, you only have one more game to go on this West Coast road trip before you bring it on to Chicago on the road, and then you bring it on back home. So, yeah, it's been brutal. We knew it was going to be brutal. I was hoping for 1 or 2 wins, pretty much one. They don't have it. You can possibly get that done against the Sacramento Kings. Before we get started there, though, Doug, let's open up the floor with New Year's resolutions. Tell the people what kind of New Year's resolutions that you have.
Yeah, so I sent this out on subtext, joinsubtext.com/LockedOnHornets. I use them for content, is basically what it is. But in exchange, they get my depraved Hornets thoughts. So that's the deal.
Fair trade.
But here are a couple of New Year's resolutions from the subtexters. And I thought, this one's the obvious one. This person texted me, health, 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 and health. So that's going to be a big New Year's resolution for a lot of people, but definitely for the Hornets, as they did not have 4 of their starters in this game against Denver. And then here's one. Let's see Brandon Miller play more on ball, especially in games like today if Terry sits. And that's exactly what happened, Walker. Terry sat, was a late scratch, went from probable to questionable at shoot-around, and then from questionable to out about an hour or so before the game. And so Brandon continues to have his role expand, and he was on the ball. The numbers don't love that performance, Walker. He was 5 of 17 from the field, 29%, took the most shots of any player. What did you think of Brandon's performance in this game against Denver?
Well, I didn't think it was great. I thought, especially with him being on ball, I think the idea, right, when you're on ball, it's creating for others. That's the idea when that's your responsibility. Of course, you would love to create for yourself too. And if you just want to go ISO the whole time, if you just have a nuclear type of game, then hell yeah, feed that man the ball and then get out of his way. He's not there yet because he's 20 years old, and it's the first half of his first NBA season ever. He still clearly is one of the best players on the roster, one of the better, certainly the guy with the most potential. But Brandon Miller right now probably isn't the guy that you throw the basketball to and say, okay, go dominate for 4 quarters. We can see it for quarters. We saw it against Phoenix, and it's cool to see him earn the respect already from guys like Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, who's a U team he played for. We saw a social media interaction between the Stars and Brandon. But I think right now it still isn't a great answer. And so you can experiment with it. Love seeing him get ready for the future. It's not like I would be fine with him being the primary ball handler. I'd be cool with it, but it's only because I know the benefits are to come from him learning, not because I think it's what's best for the team to win right now. And I think you see that with 1 assist. I think the most he's had all season. Did he get 5? Like, he's been sitting around 4 in a lot of the games that you pay attention to. Yeah, I think 4 a couple of times he's recorded. And it's defensively too. Like, there's just, I didn't love this performance from Brandon, but he is totally unafraid, and we've seen that the last couple of games in this West Coast road trip.
So, Walker, like on principle, you're totally right. Like you want your player on ball to not take 17 shots and only have 1 assist. You want them creating for others. But if you look at what they call a roster here at this point without 4 starters, you then have to ask the follow-up question, create for who? Right? Are you creating for Bryce McGowens? Are you creating for Ish Smith? Ish Smith was creating for himself. I mean, his mid-range game was nuts.
Mid-range, gotta love it.
I mean, got his ring. It was ring ceremony night for Ish Smith,
By the way, not
world
to make
champion.
this topic, but like Ish just barely getting the shot over the trees in the paint every single time he takes one. Like it's bare, then splash. It's been fun to watch that.
It's wonderful and also disheartening at the same time. It's possible to be both of those things, I think. Because it's wonderful in the sense that like it kept them afloat in the game, and it was nice. It was a throwback kind of game for Ish Smith. But you look at that and go, man, if the Hornets have to depend on that, there was just 0 shot. Even though they were tied going into the half at 49, you had this sense that like, yeah, they were tied, but that was because they had to have Ish go off in the mid-range. And Miles Bridges had a good second quarter, blah, blah, blah. But let's get back to Brandon Miller. So create for who is the question, and the answer is nobody. Like Brandon Miller had to do what he did. Miles Bridges, too, created a lot for himself as well, although he did tally 5 assists. You know, I don't necessarily have a problem with this game because this is the moment that you want Brandon Miller to start to spread his wings a little bit, knowing that you're going to have to squint your eyes a little bit to see the humble beginnings of what will be for this guy when he puts on weight, when he learns to handle the basketball and dribble through traffic. Although in this one, I thought, you know, there were issues, like he dribbles into situations where he gets himself into trouble, but he didn't turn the basketball over too much in this game, which has been a problem for him in previous games. He was able to create space for himself, just didn't always knock down the shot. Mm-hmm. So you have to squint your eyes here, but there's a lot of hope for Brandon Miller, so I wouldn't be too disheartened by the 5 of 17 game.
Well, yeah, I think that's totally fair. And I know you're not saying that I am making that distinction, but just to be clear, there's no problem that I have with this game at all. Like 0 problem. There is not any disheartened feeling that I have having consumed this game last night. If we are talking about what Brandon Miller's best role is suited as now, I don't think it's on ball. If you're talking about trying to win the basketball game, if you are talking about him learning as much as he possibly can, you throw him into that situation because you know that is going to be a lot of his career, you know, depending on how much he improves at it, right? But this is the only way you can find out. I'm here for all of that. The other thing is, as we go back and watch, you know, we had talked about the passing games between, you know, them and the Clippers. I was it Phoenix? They had 29 assists. There were a couple games there that they were close to 30, right? They were moving the ball a lot better. Some of that, you know, that was with Terry out there as well, who has improved passing by a tremendous amount, especially from last year to this year. We've just seen him improve quite a bit. You know, when Terry's out, it's going to be really hard to ask them to get to anything close to that number. And so I actually think Miles, the joke is when he does decide to pass, he's actually a pretty good passer. Miles is good, but also Brandon is clearly as well. It's just all like secondary stuff, right? And so do you want him, when the guys come back healthy, that's the idea at least, to get better suited in a role that he's going to play this year when guys are healthy, or do you just want to throw it all at him? I think that's the question. And honestly, Doug, like I really don't care. Like I don't care what role you throw at him, because he's going to be asked to do a lot of different stuff in his NBA career. And so just whatever. Like this is clearly experimental mode right now. They just lost 11 straight. They started at 7-14 on this 11-game losing streak, and now here they are at 7-25 right now. I mean, it's a brutal season that isn't going to the postseason. So we're in an experimental mode. Once Mark comes back, Brandon, we're going to try to see who the core guys are, who else you want to keep around your Brandon Miller, LaMelo Ball, maybe Mark Williams, whoever. We're going to see all about it, but this is experimental mode.
Well, I would say this too. It's impressive that he got 17 shots up, because the Nuggets knew that it was Miles Bridges and Brandon Miller and nobody else. And so they were doubling Brandon Miller. Brandon Miller's getting doubled because he's the only option, not because, I mean, he's a good offensive player. I don't even say fantastic yet. He's going to get there. But he's not such that you would be like automatic double, got to get on that guy. But Denver knew early that they were going to pressure him. and he got 17 shots off. If he's shooting 5 of 17 when they have all 4 of their starters back, then you go, okay, might be a problem here. Somebody needs to sit down and tell Brandon, like, understand your role on the team. But his role last night was to put up 17 shots.
Yeah.
He just happened not to make enough of them.
Yeah, and he's been sitting at that. I mean, think about this. There were 4 straight games right before the West Coast road trip that he shot 16 field goal attempts, 4 consecutive. Next one, how he broke it, was shooting 17. That's what Brandon is hunting when there is an injury or when he's really involved in the offense, right? You can go ahead and bank on him putting up 16, 17 shots. That's how consistent it's been. And so no different last night. Last thing on Brandon Miller before we move on. I did want to say I did think this wasn't a very good defensive game from him. I thought there were lots of times, especially Michael Porter Jr. running off screens.
Tough
I
cover.
thought he just it's not like, when Miles Bridges gets beat, there's just a gap and he doesn't realize he got beat until his man catches the basketball under the basket. I don't think it was that big. I think it was just he's a second too late. Michael Porter cuts, 1, oh, bleep, got to run with him. And then it's too late because, Michael's just going to go ahead and shoot from the perimeter. I think not enough resistance, with guys cutting into the paint. I just didn't think it was a very good defensive game from him. And he's not a great defensive player anyway because it's really hard to make that transition in your first year. I just thought there were quite a few times that he lost his guy amidst traffic, some screen navigation when there's the pick and roll going on with PJ, with Nick Richards, whoever is helping him out in that pick and roll. I thought it was particularly weak on that end of the floor in this one.
Yeah, he takes a lot of pride in his defense, and he's in a tough situation because he is starting so early in his career, and he's going up against this immense talent at the 2 position that's either quicker or stronger than him. On literally every single night, there's a guy that's quicker than him or stronger than him, and sometimes both. And so, he's trying to navigate that the best he can, but he takes a lot of pride on the defensive end, and he talks a lot on the defensive end. And I think, I wonder if that pressure to be sort of the quarterback of the defense and to get everybody in their own spot can affect your own ability to oh yeah, I got a guy too. I'm telling this guy where to go and this guy where to be, and hey, you do this, and then all of a sudden my guy's at the basket. I wonder if there's a little bit of that going on.
Yeah, it's a lot. This is what we've talked about. It's a ton of responsibility for Brandon Miller right now, and I think he's more than passed the test on how well he's played. All right, let's move on. Maybe give you some more observations from this game coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
We'll give you our finishing thoughts. Plus, Gordon Hayward, he hopped on with Podcast P and had some interesting comments. It was one of the more candid times I think we've seen Gordon Hayward, and so we'll get to some of those comments in just a moment. Before we get to Gordon Hayward and what he had to say with Paul George, I want to talk to you about Prize Picks. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. It's the largest daily fantasy sports platform in North America. It's the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports because it's just you against the numbers. Instead of battling thousands of other players, including pros and sharks, you pick more or less than on 2 to 6 player stat projections, and you can watch the winnings roll in. With the basketball season here, you can now pick combo projections across football and basketball from the Specials League. It's a league created specifically for combo projections that includes 2 or more players from different sports. If you want to include the NFL here, only 1 more week in the regular season, and then you get to the postseason. But you still have 1 more week where all of the teams are going to be available, so make sure you hop on that. Prize Picks even offers a reboot policy so that your entries stay in play, even if one of your players gets injured. For football and basketball games, if you have a player who exits the game in the first half and doesn't return in the second, that player is then rebooted. Prize Picks is the only daily fantasy sports platform with an injury insurance policy, so take advantage of that as well. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. Again, go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA. Use code LockedOnNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. More Locked On Hornets ahead. Doug, let's go back to your subtext. Let's continue to sprinkle some of the New Year's resolutions, maybe go game observations, and then get to Gordon Hayward commentary. What's another New Year's resolution you have?
I got this one from the 336 area code. Wear ankle braces. Do what's best for the longevity of your career. An obvious
Who's he talking
comment.
About there? Is it
Brandon
you
Miller,
specifically? Okay.
Yeah, it's me. He wanted me to wear ankle braces. This is a very physical medium, podcasting, and you want to make sure that we don't go down with injury.
Yeah, for sure.
I need ankle braces for my throat to keep the phlegm away, so I can keep the
Throat
dollars
braces.
out of the.
Okay, we'll work on that.
Yeah, we'll figure that out. Let's see Brandon play more, just not up more on ball, just play more. People want more of the young guys. I love NSJ. We need a more NSJ movements.
Yeah.
So figure out a way to get more NSJ on the floor and then do something. There's a New Year's resolution for Charlotte Hornets. Do something.
Every year, do something. Yeah, we'll see if whoever the new regime is will abide by that philosophy. Any other observations? If we went to everyhornetsboxscore.com, what kind of other notes would we find there, Doug?
Well, so this game was eerily similar to the Nuggets game at home in Charlotte that preceded this godforsaken West Coast road trip, and that the Hornets hung around with the world champs for 2 quarters.
It really is godforsaken. Like I felt every emphasis you put. Like I felt the heart of this godforsaken West. Like it just, you and I imagine a lot of other Hornets fans felt when you said that, Doug. I just wanted to give you credit for encapsulating all of our feelings.
Well, because and that's exactly why it's godforsaken, because it's so brutal to watch the Hornets compete for 2 quarters against really good teams and then have that hope build up. The hope is the sickness. We're sickos because we hope, because we look and go 49-49. Could the Hornets pull off a miracle and beat the world champs in Denver? And then third quarter, 40-17 in favor of Denver. The Hornets shoot 1 of 5 from 3. They shoot, I believe, 36% overall from the field. They turned it over 5 times early. I think all 5 of those turnovers were early in the third quarter, and Denver turned those into 10 points. And so you might ask yourself, why does this keep happening? Because it's not just against Denver. In a couple of these other games, the Hornets have competed and they couldn't finish off. They couldn't stay for 48 minutes. So why is this happening? And I think there's a pretty simple explanation, Walker, and I want to see if you agree with me here. I think that all of these West Coast teams, the Hornets are traveling all over the place. They know that. They know the Hornets are road weary, and they also know that they're injured. They get a copy of the scouting report that says no Terry, no LaMelo, no Mark Williams. And they say, hey, this might be a night for us to either try something new or maybe just try to take it easy. I mean, look, these are all human beings. And as human beings, I'll just speak for myself. I try to do the least possible work to get the best outcome.
Yeah.
And I think that's what these guys are doing. For a half, they're going, all right, let's take the foot like halfway off the pedal. And then the Hornets compete. And that's admirable. These guys are doing this. But then in the third quarter, at halftime, Mike Malone's telling the guys, all right, full pedal. And that's what you saw from Jokic and Murray and Gordon and MPJ. And it just overwhelms a team that does not have enough talent to be good NBA teams right now.
Oh, yeah. I mean, not only do I agree with it, it's something we talked about after the Lakers game. I mean, Doug, these stars are not playing 30 minutes against the Hornets. They're just not getting to 30. We went for that Lakers game when they scored 133, and AD and LeBron are both playing 25 and 26. It's done. All right, let's empty the bench. Here you have Nikola Jokic. Here he plays 28 minutes, and Jamal Murray plays 27. And all right, we're done. We destroyed him in the third quarter. Now we go get some more rest in the locker room. We're like, all right, that was a fun first quarter. Oh man, yeah, all right, let's turn it on up. And you're right how eerily similar it was, because in the first half of both of these Nuggets games, Nikola just didn't shoot. Like he just wasn't shooting the basketball.
He took one attempt in the first half. He was 1 of 1, and he didn't get fouled either. He was 1 of 1 for 2 points. These stars are going into these games, Walker, like they need an Xbox achievement. Like they need one of the weird Xbox achievements. So they're playing the game to get the achievement, and then they decide, okay, now we got to get serious and actually win the game.
Yeah, and 7 field goal attempts from the 2-time MVP that could have made it 3 straight MVPs last year. 7 field goal attempts, just 13 points. If you didn't know anything about Jokic's game, like he can affect the game probably more so. This example probably doesn't ring true as much, but Jokic can beat you in a bunch of different ways, but only 7 field goal attempts. I would still sign up for that every single game against Denver. And yet here they are still just destroying you.
And I had one subtexter ask me, on the third quarter, getting blown out in the third quarter or losing the game in the fourth quarter in this particular situation on this road trip, is that more the players or more about coaching? And it's absolutely 100% about the players. And it's not that they're not trying hard. It's that there's not enough talent. When Denver turns up the defense like they did, the Hornets, they're playing lineups where 2 and sometimes 3 guys cannot shoot three-pointers. In 2024, technically, in 2024, that's happening with the Charlotte Hornets. When you are playing teams that can go 5 out, that all 5 players can hit three-point shots, that fundamentally changes how you have to play defense. And when you're a team that has a roster where you're depending on Ish Smith mid-range shots and Bryce McGowan's three-point attempts, then here's what Denver did. You can go back and watch it. Here's what Denver did. They dropped on literally every pick and roll. They said, you are not getting anywhere near this rim. That forces you to pass outside. And then they jumped the passing lanes, turned the Hornets over, and got easy points. It's simple. And it's really up to a team in Denver or Phoenix or whatever, and Sacramento tonight. It's really up to them whether they would like to do that in the first quarter, the second quarter, the third quarter, or wait until the fourth quarter.
Well, and even so, here they've been dealing with all these injuries. You mentioned how at least Denver in this scenario just said you're not getting anything close to the basket. I mean, Doug, I can't help but go to that Clippers game just because I thought that was as valiant an effort as we saw. And it's not that they're being lazy in these other games. I just really liked what we saw from the team, even in a loss. And they were getting shots at the rim because of all the cutting and the passing. And they just looked like a pretty damn fine-tuned offensive, I don't want to say machine. They looked better than usual, given all the stars that were out, given all of the injuries that they continue to suffer. And so, yeah, of course, when you force them to play a perimeter game, now that you also don't have Terry Rozier, that's when we get back to Brandon Miller taking the most field goal attempts among anybody in this game. And then Miles was able to get downhill at least a couple times here. He still shot a few threes. He shot 5 3-pointers, but Miles' shot profile in this one, I liked it. I mean, 5 3-pointers, 14 overall, and he got to the rim a few times, and he even made his 3-pointers for the most part, 3 of 5. You'll take that. Yeah, it's just there's nobody else that you're truly scared of, and that's with Bryce playing well. Bryce McGowan's can only be so threatening, but that's even with Bryce playing well. You're still going to let him, let it fly from wherever he wants to.
Well, and when that's exactly what I'm saying though. Miles Bridges is a great example. He got downhill. But there were a couple of those. I mean, he only missed 4 shots, but on a couple of those misses, he put his head down and was like, I've got to score a basket because no one else is hitting shots. And when he does that, and when other guys do that, because Brandon Miller did that a few times, the entire Denver defense collapses on that player. And that's where the no margin for error happens, where you have to make great decisions at the rim. Because if you do that, if you put your head down and you telegraph, hey, I'm going to go to the basket here, the defense, because they don't respect any of those other shooters, then that's a block shot. And then Denver, good enough team in transition. They've got, the baseball tosser and Jokic, and they've got a lot of other players that can run. They take those block shots and make them immediate and automatic points.
Only 111 points, though, for Denver. It's funny because, Jokic scores 13. It still is the formula. Even if you get beat down, it still is the formula to give yourself a shot. But it's just they don't have enough. The Hornets don't have enough. You got some defensive thoughts?
Well, this is what I wrote in the box score, or in every Hornets box score, because this is what it made me think of this game and this entire West Coast road trip. I said these West Coast games are that cartoon that we watched as kids where someone is crawling through the desert, desperate for water, and they look up and they see this oasis, mirage in the desert. But by the 5-minute mark of the third quarter, it's just Nick Smith Jr. sitting on the ground eating sand and laughing hysterically because it all is a mirage. Even that first half, and God bless these players and Coach Clifford too, they're doing the best they can. But when you're missing 4 starter level players in the NBA on a team that was not even at fully healthy lauded as super talented by I would say the larger NBA commentariat. When that's happening, you just anything that happens in the first half, I think is more about Denver's effort than it is, about what the Hornets are doing execution.
Well, just execution. Well, and Denver's execution, Denver's effort, but also, I mean,
their passing was horrible in the first half. They did not look like a world champion Denver team. Like that, you're not getting Denver's best shot in the first half. And again, as Charlotte, you're taking advantage of that, but eventually they're going to put the boot on your neck.
That's true. That's true. I just go back to the beginning of the game. Jamal hits like 3 straight 3-pointers, one in transition. I mean, so yeah, even if the rest of the team isn't executing, when you have 9 points, 3 straight baskets from Jamal, who, I think, was it Brandon? Somebody fell down, and then there's the transition 3 where everybody gets back. They want to defend rim. Nobody picks up ball, and then he's like, all right, I'll just let it fly. And so, yeah, even early on, there were some shots made. But you're right. It was not a great first half for Denver. And here I am talking about Jokic and his passing, and he only got 6 assists. It's not like he had a million of them.
What a loser.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah, should have won that third MVP. Then we'll give you credit, Jokic, please. All right, let's move on before we start criticizing maybe the best player in the game. Coming up next on the Locked On Hornets podcast.
Don't go to sleep on the Hornets just yet.
Want to try to get to those Gordon Hayward comments, but also find the local angle. Like when something is happening in Charlotte that is so ridiculous as the Panthers owner throwing a drink at a fan, yes, that happened in Jacksonville, then we have to try to find the local angle there. Plus, we'll give you some more New Year's resolutions. That's still to come in the final segment. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL regular season, it's wrapping up, but there's still time to get in on the action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place a $5 bet. That's $150 in bonus bets, win or lose, and the app is so easy to use. There's so many different ways to bet, like live same-game parlays. You can find bets in the new Explore tab as well. You can make a parlay in the Parlay Hub. Parlays are fun, man. The best way to find popular parlays. Plenty more involved too on FanDuel.com/lockedon. I saw that the line for this game, Doug, was 15. It's been 12, 15, 10.
It's moved.
15.
It's moved. It's now 16.
No, I was saying 15 for the Nuggets game. That's what it was coming in. So I don't know what it is for the Kings. I would guess
it's
something.
16. Yeah, it's 16.
Is it 16? Okay. Yeah. That's where it's been sitting. And they've not been covering. I've been also dodging the phlegm bucket. And so as soon as we make some more errors, we're going to be able to get back to Bet the Buzz. And so we'll do that.
I think we do it after this road trip. I think we can't. We got to let this road trip wash over us, and then we're going to Bet the Buzz again.
All right. And we're going to do it on FanDuel.com. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon. Make your first bet a layup. One more time. FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of the NFL. One more segment to go. Locked On Hornets. More New Year's resolutions. Doug, what do you have for us? And the people that actually want your depraved Hornets thoughts despite the 11-game losing streak. What you got?
I got the biggest resolution they should have is hiring a good GM who then helps hire a good head coach. No more half measures. And then another one here, plan for a reset with LaMelo and Brandon Miller. Find a creative GM that can make Charlotte an attractive place to play. The example given here is Oklahoma City.
Yeah, Oklahoma City's set up pretty well. That would be nice to just be.
Who traded the Hornets, Miles Bridges for Shai Gilgeous-Alexander.
That is correct. That did happen. Well, the Clippers did. But then Shai went to Oklahoma City. Either way, it's frustrating. Let's go to Gordon Hayward's comments real quickly. So Gordon joined Paul George on his podcast P Show, and he was talking about his future. And Doug, it seems a little bit like he wants to stay here in Charlotte. So Paul George asked him, what does the future hold to you as you're winding down the last couple of years of your career? Like what do you want to accomplish going forward? That's what Paul said. This is what Gordon Hayward said. That's a good question. You know what? I think it's hard to look too far into the future because I don't know. I think ever since I got injured, I like to just take it game by game because you just never know which game would be your last. And so right now I'm loving playing in Charlotte. My family loves living in Charlotte. We got 4 great kids. And so I'm just loving being where I'm at. So let's focus on that one first. I mean, I can only hear so many athletes tell me how many times or how much they love Charlotte, where I can't be surprised by this comment anymore. We see it constantly, Doug. It doesn't matter.
It's a great place
Football,
to live.
basketball, guys that have been journeymen. You know, Josh McCown made his home here after playing for like 14 different NFL teams. Even guys that never played at all in Charlotte. Randy Moss lives in the city. Allen Iverson, as David Walker would tell you, lives in the city. People love it here. And so when Gordon Hayward, a well-traveled man who has ties to Indiana, grew up in Indiana, wanted to go to the Pacers, if they would have just matched the kind of salary that the Hornets offered him, probably would be an Indiana Pacer right now, but he's not. He moves to Charlotte, and here he loves it along with his family who loves the Queen City. I'm not surprised at all. I don't know if it's his call to live here, but if it were up to him, Doug, he might just want to come back.
Well, if I were the Charlotte Tourism Board, I would get all of these folks together for a big commercial that just says Charlotte's where it's at. Charlotte's a great place to live if you are a talented athlete. I think the problem is, like when you mentioned Moss and Iverson and all these guys, those were guys that came after their careers were over, because that's a problem with that's North Carolina when you're trying to compete with a few of these other destinations as a tax implications. If you're going to be making a huge contract, in Miami or some of these other places versus a state like North Carolina that has a state income tax, then you're going to be losing a few more dollars. But yeah, people love to live in Charlotte. I'm not surprised by this. I was laughing while you were reading that because he said, I think ever since I got injured, and my brain went, which time?
Yeah.
Like obviously he's talking about the leg issue
yeah.
in Boston, but that's what my brain went to, because there have been so many injuries. And look, just like Kelly Oubre, I'm going to say the same thing. I think it's cool that he wants to stay. I don't think that matters. I think the contract was too big. The injuries have been too much, and they're going to find a way to part.
Although it would make more sense than, and even if Kelly is playing well in Philadelphia, I think the basketball fit would make more sense with Gordon. But I don't know I have really no clue what kind of money he's going to get. Like that's a tough contract. A new one for Gordon, that is a tough one to try to figure out. And usually, you feel like you can get within $5 million. It's not right. Like usually feel pretty good about within a $5 million window. This one could be a pretty big range, Doug.
And we don't know who's going to be negotiating that contract. Is it going to be Mitch Kupchak? Is it going to be some new general manager? But you do bring up a good point. Like, look, if Gordon Hayward goes out, if they don't trade him and he goes out into the free market and the free market says, we're all right. I don't think so. Then he could, they could find some way to say, look, how much do you love living in Charlotte? Do you love it?
If it's Mitch, he's going to test him, because we know Mitch is going to test him in that.
How much do you love it? So, I mean, is it like, $5-10 million under what you think your market value is? How much do you love living here? And they should definitely test it. They should absolutely. It should be, if Gordon Hayward comes back to this team, it should be on a short-term deal, and it should be a sweetheart short-term deal. Anything other than that, I think you as a fan would have a right to guffaw.
And I think you're a year older, so that helps the defined role, but also not being on a $30 million a year contract anymore, that would help. It's not like you need to start him, right? Like here, I don't know, just you at least wash yourself of those types of expectations. You have a new deal, you're in a new phase of your career. New expectations come with all of that. So I think that would help also. You want to find the local angle on David Tepper for the show? I mean, it's easy because he's here in Charlotte, but how do we make it so local that it affects the basketball team, Doug?
Well, anytime we talk about David Tepper, because he owns the Carolina Panthers, billionaire owner, and he's done some things that have not made fans very happy, my mind always goes to the comparison, even though he's no longer the majority stakeholder in the Charlotte Hornets. My mind always goes to Michael Jordan. And I think David Tepper, again, continues. We went through this in politics when Donald Trump was elected. A lot of people look back on the Bush years with a lot of people on one particular side of the aisle look back on the Bush years with maybe some rose-colored glasses after going through some of the stuff that happened with Trump.
Because in comparison, right? Yeah.
Right. We do these sort of comparison things, and I think we might do that with Michael Jordan. We look back on Michael Jordan and go, well, I mean, it wasn't nearly as bad. He never threw a drink at opposing fans. He sat courtside. See, that's the problem. If David Tepper needs to be on the field like Jerry Jones, then he's not going to get in trouble throwing anything at opposing fans.
Michael Jordan that angle. Let's bring him closer to the action. I think most people, that is called zigging while everyone else is zagging. It is
well, you wouldn't get in trouble.
He needs to be closer to the action rather than being suspended, which is the conversation happening right now. I absolutely love that take.
But Michael Jordan was respected. He wasn't respected by fans necessarily who wanted a better product on the floor, but he was a respected member in like negotiations. And so there's the key difference between Michael Jordan and David Tepper is that like people within the higher ups of other teams and Adam Silver respected Michael Jordan's opinion. I don't know if the same could be said about David Tepper at this point, but I would also say this. You know, Scott Fowler is in his bag right now for the Charlotte. He is for the Charlotte Observer, the columnist. He is loving all of this right now. He's got ineptitude. He's bringing out all the things. And while Michael Jordan was never, I mean, he never threw a drink at opposing fans. Like he never reached these depths. Still, if you go back and look at some of the Charlotte Observer articles, columns that were written at the time of the Bobcats' descent into hell, that a lot of the same things are still being written, like he should sell the team, that, you know, he's doing a really bad job. And a lot of people wanted Michael Jordan to sell the team. And guess what? Michael Jordan didn't sell the team until way later, until after he had just gotten bored. Like that was the thing I picked up from the podcast, Paul George's podcast with Gordon Hayward. Yeah. Is that they were asking him, hey, any fun stories with Michael Jordan? And he's like, no, he was never around. Like I saw him on the bench like 3 times because Michael Jordan eventually, after Kemba Walker left, Michael Jordan got bored with the team and then he sold. Yeah. And so all you folks that are thinking like, oh, the NFL is going to make him sell it. No, they will not. He is going to be the owner until he decides I no longer want to be the owner of this team.
Well, and then, you know, so you're right. Like, just to do this in basketball sense, I think the big owner ousting that we saw was Adam Silver's first big move as NBA commissioner, getting rid of Donald Sterling. So many people put that at the hands of Adam Silver, who was a part of it. But also, that doesn't happen if the owners don't sign off on getting rid of the old senile racist in the NBA. And so the owners have to sign off on it. Do the owners care enough about David Tepper throwing a cup at a fan in Jacksonville to say, hey, this guy is awful for the league? No, it's nowhere close. And to be quite honest with you, it has to be a Sterling, Sarver, or anything less but in the same category type of thing for David Tepper to be driven out of the NFL at this point. But the NFL owners are not going to vote on this to the point where, yes, they want to kick David Tepper out, and Roger Goodell can't be the only guy that says, you know what, this isn't good for our league, we're going to kick him out. No, none of that's going to happen. He's going to be an owner for the Carolina Panthers for as long as David Tepper wants to, unless there is something that is a bigger scandal for, you know, for David Tepper and his corporation.
Or he just gets bored. That's what I'm telling you. Michael Jordan sold because of 2 reasons. One, that there were some other teams that sold that made the valuation of the next sale go through the roof. And so he made considerably more money selling now than he would had he sold a couple of years ago, because I don't think things have changed that dramatically for him over the past couple of 5 years. So he could have sold then. But he waits for a couple more sales to happen and the price goes up. But ultimately it came down to, in my opinion, he just has other interests that are more interesting and win more. It's NASCAR stuff. There's stuff that's happening right now. He loves to win, and this team was not winning. And that was partly his fault, but he, got bored and I think if this team ever, I'm telling you, I want to put this out here into the world, and we'll, hopefully revisit it someday. If this team does start to win suddenly and they become a playoff series winning team over the next, 5-10 years, I'm telling you, Michael Jordan will buy his majority stake back.
If they want to sell it at that point, but if the new owners want to sell
what I'm telling you is that Schnall and Plotkin are puppets. Okay. They are. This is a puppet regime. They are just holding down the fort. Hopefully they can get this team moving in the right direction, and then Michael Jordan will reascend as owner of the. I'm just telling. That's my prediction.
Last thing with the MJ stuff. I don't know. He did not learn his lessons 100%. There were still mistakes. But it did feel like when he hired Mitch Kupchak, and even right before the Mitch Kupchak hire, it did feel like Michael was a little less involved in basketball operations. The Malik Monk story where they decided to draft him instead of Donovan Mitchell, that was not a Michael Jordan call. The reports are that Rich Cho, wanting to save his job, he's the one that pounded the table for Malik. while Steve Clifford wanted Donovan Mitchell, and so he's the choice. When you have Mitch, I do think that Mitch is the guy drafting Miles. I do think Mitch is the guy drafting PJ. I do think the GM and the scouting department are the ones that are making all the draft decisions. Now, maybe not free agent decisions as much. Maybe Michael was the one behind Terry Rozier. We actually had some reporting that indicated Michael wanted to get Terry Rozier in exchange for the Kemba Walker sign and trade scenario. So it's not like he was completely away, but it seems like he was more away than David Tepper was. And I mean, taking guys on a tour bus, going pro day to pro day, having dinner with all these QBs. No owner does that, not with everyone. And so that's so weird. All right, that'll do it for Locked On Hornets. Thanks for making us your first listen. We're free and available anywhere you get your pods. That includes YouTube. Doug's Substack is everyhornetsboxscore.com. You can listen to me on WFNZ every weekday from 12 to 3 p.m. Have a great rest of your day. The schedule should be pretty consistent now, where we're getting away from holiday season. And so
holidays.
Yeah, done. Holidays. We are getting out of the holidays, if you will. All right. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. We'll be back with you.
Not.